Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's chat with a developer. And if you don't know who I am, I'm your Chief Librarian, David, and you're watching AlexandriaRPG Twitch. And if I got to see where I stand, I'm trying a new layout. If I stand here, the chat's over my face. If I stand here, I need to get a better background because you can see the messy stuff in my office. That's why the lights are down back there. I'm trying to figure out camera positions in this new office. But anyways, AlexandriaRPG, we're non-profit gaming library. We travel to events and we share the history of gaming with people. We're pushing around 6,000 books in the library now. We were hoping to get an inventory done this month. It doesn't look like it's going to be done this month. But hopefully the library will be moved towards the end of the month into a bigger space. Going on President's Day to look at the new space if they've approved the contract. I'm trying to spend as little money as possible on the new space, trying to double the size of our storage area for the same cost that we're spending now. When you run a nonprofit, you try to figure out how to save a nickel, a penny, a fraction of a cent everywhere. But anyways, enough about me in the library. We'll let our guest introduce himself.
Hello, my name is Alex Rinehart. I run indie RPGs in my Discord for friends and strangers alike every month. So if you're wanting to learn a new system, stop on by. But today I'm here to talk about my newest game, Cyberrats.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about Cyberrats?
Yeah, so Cyberrats it's a Lumen game, so it uses that SRD, and it is a game about cybernetic rats trying to save the world from an invading alien invasion. But there's a problem, and that's that your rival megacorp that you work for, so you work for a megacorp, you're trying to save the world, rival megacorp has it under control. So you have to stop them, save the world, make sure that it's your company saving the world, and make sure that your company is the one getting credit.
So you ran a Kickstarter, and that Kickstarter was successful, from what I understand.
Yeah, it was a huge success. We knocked out most of our stretch goals. Extremely pleased with that.
Nice. And the library helped out, and we got to have some fun and add a little bit to the behind the scenes.
Yes, I'm very excited. Yeah, I exchanged a few emails with you, getting some extra flavor added to the book.
That was a blast. Somebody's saying you're a little quiet. Can you turn your volume up? I've got you cranked on this end.
Let me see if I might be able to. Give me just a minute here. Okay, is that any different?
Internet. How about the people in chat? Does he sound louder?
If I talk now, am I any clearer than I was before? Maybe
well, no one's.
Not
really.
Oh, hang on. Is there any difference now?
All of a sudden, sounds like a.
No, what else can do?
All of a sudden, sounds like a Verizon commercial. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me now? Yes. Not really. Again. Okay, I don't know what I can do to make myself louder.
Well, we'll just drive on and see what we can do. People can hear you. Just I already did turn myself down. Turn down for what? No. Bad musical references.
I'll have to.
So, is there anything you would like to reveal about Cyberrats, besides your cybernetic rats trying to save the world from aliens?
So there are a couple secrets that are hidden in the book, but I don't think I want to reveal them now. But I will say that there are some things that we put in the book that that we like intentionally did not reveal during the Kickstarter or when talking about it, and that is really hard.
Nice.
It is so hard to just to have a piece of information and not share it. I mean, you've run games, you know the struggle.
Yes. Especially when you point something out and everybody's like just blows right past it. You're like, man, I spent a whole lot of time setting this really cool little Easter egg up, and no one looks at it. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, no, I think that, yeah, it's like the most important part of running an ongoing game is having someone not associated with the game that you can tell all of the things that you're planting. Because otherwise, I want to tell the players everything.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's the same way when making a game. Like there's a couple things in this. I'm hoping that when everyone gets a copy of this book, they open it up or they go to the PDF, and there's a moment where they say, "Oh wow, I didn't realize that was happening." Or that it was like that, and I don't want to I don't want to say too much more about that. But here's something to actually answer your question. I can say this: Cyberrats started as a Shadowrun hack.
Okay.
I think it's pretty universal for people to play Shadowrun and say, "Wow, that was really complex," and I wish it was simpler. I wish that I had that setting in a different game. And that's why there's a million Shadowrun conversions. That's why
Yes.
there's the Genesis one. That's why you can find the Forged in the Dark one that Cascade worked on. You can find all of these different things of people porting Shadowrun into their own games. And like
Because
game designer, yeah, go ahead.
because Shadowrun exists to this day because it's probably one of the coolest worlds that's been built. But the rules have always been. I mean, I played Shadowrun First Edition. Shadowrun First Edition was so broken. It has gotten far better over the years, but there's still a lot of things that are off-putting to people. But the world is so cool. I know people that love the system a ton. I like the system, but when it comes down to it, the thing that always brings me back to picking up anything for Shadowrun is the cool world, and I love that people have taken that cyberpunk fantasy meld together and done other things with it.
Yeah, and it's for that reason, for that world, that I go for like all the Shadowrun board games, because it's like, okay, we can make a board game in this world and it will work. But yeah, I like any designer. I said, you know what? I want to take the pieces that I love of Shadowrun, which is that kind of setting of like magic and sci-fi, and I want to take some pieces of the mechanics that I love, and I started hacking them together. And I wasn't really actively working on it, but I had this growing list of, I love how the initiative works. I love this. I love this. And then Spencer Campbell released the Lumen SRD, and I said, wait a minute, this is perfect for what I want to do. Like I can pivot this and I can make this into something else. And that's how it started. And I know I'm not the only one. I know that other people have had that exact same experience of working on a game and then seeing the Lumen SRD and saying, this is what I want to do now. This is the future of my product.
Yeah, I love when people may be struggling with mechanics or something, and they find an open system that they can run with. And there's a ton of good ones out there. You got Lumen. You've got the one I try to tell everybody about and remind that exists is the Open D6 for that everyone played the old D6 Star Wars with. That's an open system.
Is it really?
And it is, yeah. Open D6 is a system. And a lot of people don't know that. So
I didn't know. I have the old West End Star Wars game. It's great. I didn't know it was open.
Yeah, it's Open D6. In fact, a gentleman bought all the West End stuff and tried really hard to get the Star Wars licenses back. Sadly, that was ever going to happen. And hats off to him. But he ended up releasing everything as Open D6, and In fact, if you go to DriveThruRPG, they have core rules for fantasy, sci-fi, and modern settings. And then you just go to the open D6. It's set up like a wiki and tells you just like, hey, go for it, have fun. And it's the D6 Star Wars rules with a little polish. And
oh, that's incredible.
There's a couple people that somebody I know that they'd finished their Kickstarter and they're like, oh God, I wish I'd known about that. He goes, we spent so much time doing all this, and he goes, we were trying to emulate so many things from D6 Star Wars, but we didn't want to copy it. He goes, we could have, because it's open. And it's funny because he's now working on another game in the same style as his first game, using the open D6 system. But everybody knows about using, like Lumen's one that kind of goes under the radar, because most people go, oh, hey, we can use Apocalypse, we can use Fate, or they try Fifth Ed. You know, they try all these ways that sometimes are a bit of a pain, but you know, some of these other ones are easier to use, and easier to use for the designer and easier to use for the players. Because the little I have played with Lumen, I really like it. It's easy for players to grasp. Same reason why I've always loved the D6 system. It's super easy for players to grasp.
Well, and I wanna shout out a fellow creator, which is the Drakes, Sean and Navi Drake. They publish as a couple of Drakes. They made an incredible game last year called Hedge, which I just love.
I'll have to see if we can get our hands on a copy.
You are wardens defending against the Fae. Like, humanity is basically gone, and you are the last few people fighting against the Fae. They were going to release this as a 5e game, and they were trying to make it work, and they did the same thing I did. They saw Lumen, and they said, this is where our game goes.
Nice.
Hedge, I cannot recommend Hedge highly enough. It has the best character creation page I've ever seen in an RPG.
So what is it that actually drew you to using Lumen?
Yeah, what drew me to Lumen is that it kept the dice pool. Like, you know, I'm looking at, okay, what makes Shadowrun Shadowrun? And it's like, you've got the setting, you have a dice pool, and there's a few other things that are like very big, and a couple of them did get scrapped as I pivoted, but I wanted to keep the D6 dice pool. It feels good to roll a bunch of D6, but you don't necessarily need to roll 15 or 20 just to fire your gun.
Yeah.
And I wanted, like, I'm not exaggerating when I say that if you attack someone in Shadowrun, there is a flow chart that you follow. Like, that is a real thing.
Yes.
I wanted to cut down on that.
That has its roots back into, because Shadowrun came out in '89, so I mean, it has its roots back into older, more complex RPGs, and a lot of people just don't understand why RPGs, like, wow, why were they so complex? Because they were literally just, they were taking tabletop war games and breaking them. They were first trying to break them down to the squad level, then break them down to the you're playing the individual character. So you had complex natures of the tabletop war games that existed and stayed throughout RPGs. And it's funny because there were a handful through the 80s that kind of ditched a lot of that, but it was still a very prevalent thing. And then you had companies like Avalon Hill that made hugely complex board games that tried to get into RPGs. And then one of my favorites is to read Powers and Perils. Read the first 2 paragraphs of character creation. People just stare at me like, I don't even know what the F that you just said. I was like, literally, it says you're gonna roll on these 2 charts for your stats. They're like, what? It's like the phenotypical stereotype. And it's like, what? Why are you using these words?
Someone in the chat said that Shadowrun is clearly a product of its time. That's true. Unfortunately, it keeps getting remade with those same artifacts from its time.
Like, they've cleaned up so many things in the editions through the years, but some of the things that make Shadowrun what they are at its core mechanics wise are those kind of clunky things that have grown out of the 1989 rules that we were just talking about. Because and what's sad is if you get rid of those, you lose the character. I mean, there was a big revolt between 3rd and 4th edition D&D for a reason.
Yep.
And people are like, why wasn't there a big revolt between 2nd and 3rd? I was like, because the entire industry pretty much died between 2nd and 3rd.
Yeah.
So when 3rd edition came out, they were resetting everything, and they even they even like, hey, we're resetting everything. We take the A, it's just D&D, because
Yep.
I mean, all through the 90s, all through the 80s and 90s, TSR was making D&D and AD&D, and people didn't know that they were different systems, and it's like, what?
Right.
So, with Shadowrun, and it's the same thing with Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk Red has definitely cleaned up the rules a lot, but Cyberpunk through the years came out in '88, just a little ahead of Shadowrun, but it had a couple iterations with minor cleanups, and Cyberpunk Red has been a nice cleanup of the rules. But there's still a lot of the great things that make Cyberpunk what it is from its original iteration.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a difficult thing to take a product that is old and that has a following and modernize it without alienating that following.
Yeah. I mean, if you've ever played Rifts, I mean,
I have not.
There's a lot. So Rifts is actually a pretty good game. It's laid out different than most games. So most people walking into it that have played RPGs like, none of this makes sense. It's horrible. And it's like, no, just come at it. Like, it's funny because I meet people that have never played an RPG before. And they're like, oh, I get this. And it's because they've not been tainted by the standard way of layout of RPGs. And they're like, oh, I get this. And it's like, it's funny that a person that's never played before can get it. Whereas somebody that's been playing for 10 years, like, I don't like how it's laid out. No. These rules are stupid.
We were talking before the show about Fiasco.
Yes.
And I have the same experience. Whenever I teach Fiasco, if I have someone who's never played an RPG before, they're like, oh, okay, I set a scene and then we act it out. But people who come from a D&D background, it takes them a while to like click over and like, how do I roll to resolve my action? It's like, no, you don't. You tell us, like, you just tell us what you're doing, and we'll tell you if it works or not. Like,
yeah, the old Steve Jackson game Toon. You have 3 stats. One of your stats is chutzpah, and when you're making your character, you can have 1 item, and you say, make whatever item you want. And then it's funny because you get somebody that's been playing RPGs for years, and they come up with this super complex, very specific item. And you're like, okay. And they're like, I can have that? And the guy next to him's like, can I have a bag that, like one of my favorite things that I ever created for Toon was I had a character who had a bag I could pull cream pies out of and throw them at people. And there's always a useful item in there. But but I didn't know what the item was until it hit with the person I'm throwing it at. So it's useful, but I've now got to go get it. So It's like being silly and creative and out of the box, and then you get the guy that's been playing for years like, I could have made something like that. Like, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that makes no sense. It's like, it's Toon. you're playing a cartoon character. Why isn't anything got to make sense?
Yeah. And I feel the same way playing with kids. Like, if you go in and you say, okay, here's this adventure, I'm gonna unleash a bunch of tigers. They're not gonna fight the tigers. They're gonna befriend the tigers. They're gonna tame the tiger. They're gonna ride it. They're gonna talk to it. And it's like, it takes that. There's something that happens between when you're little and when you're an adult playing D&D, where your instinct is, I'm gonna kill this tiger, and it's a terrible thing. Yeah,
that's why it hurt D&D. That's why I love non-leveling games, because D&D's encourages murder hobo to get to your next level, whereas other games, if you have no incentive to murder hobo, then you're not going to default to that typically.
Right.
I've always enjoyed non-leveling systems because you tend to get players playing out of the norms that we think we know. And it's one of the things I do. I love sitting down and playing with new players. And like, but why are we going to murder all these characters? Like, well, because they're in the way. It's like, well, can we go around? Like, I don't know. Can we? You get a player's like, I guess we can.
I promise that I will pivot back to Cyberrats, but I want to talk about that.
But this is all why you end up picking why you picked up the system you did to be the backbone of Cyberrats.
And Lumen is a combat focused system. Like I will talk about that. But there's a series of games that I've been playing and loving that came out 15 years ago, and that is Scribblenauts. Do you ever play this? So it started as a DS exclusive. Now they're everywhere. But it's just like you were talking about. You can write down any object to solve the problem in front of you. And if the problem is there's a tiger here, you can summon death and the tiger dies. You can pull out a sleep dart and put it to sleep.
Make a cage.
Yeah, you can put out a cage. My favorite puzzle in that game, in all of them, is there is a little girl who's frozen in a block of ice. How do you get her out? And I've seen people like light a fire. I've seen people summon a volcano, pull out a hairdryer, a heat gun. Like it's open ended. You can do anything.
I love the summon a volcano.
It's very good. Like it's like does that solve the problem? It solves the immediate problem. You just made a worse one. But the game stops there. Like the bound. It's very Ender's Game. Like the win condition. It doesn't matter anything else. What matters is the girl got out of the ice.
Yeah. I like that. Summon a volcano. That's a new one for me.
That was my wife's first instinct. And I'm like, all right.
We'll go with that. How do you draw a volcano, though?
Well, you don't have to draw it. That's the thing. You just type it in. You spell it out, and then it does it for you.
Oh, nice. That game would probably be a nightmare for me. I spell so badly.
It helps you a little bit. Like it's like, did you mean this? It's like, yeah, I did. Thank
Good.
you. I could talk about Scribblenauts for a while, but going back to Cyberrats, since that's ostensibly why I'm here. It is a violent game. Like it is a game where your first, second, and third answers to the question should all be violence.
Well, I mean, you're playing cybernetic rats fighting aliens,
yeah,
so...
Exactly. I mean, I'm not going to pretend like this isn't an XCOM game. Like there are three things that made Cyberrats exist, and they are XCOM, Shadowrun, and Spencer Campbell.
Spencer Campbell.
And the creator of Lumen.
Oh, okay.
Like, those are the three reasons why the game looks like it does today. There's some other influences there. Like Ninja Turtles are huge. Animorphs, because that's what I was reading when I was designing it.
If you're 40 or under, Ninja Turtles is going to be an effect on your life somewhere.
It's in the water. It's in the water.
Yeah, my family had a comic book store when I was growing up, and I remember we got the first 4 issues of Ninja Turtles in, because they were very different than... because they were a different size, they were all black and white, they were super violent. We could not sell them at all. Like, nobody wanted anything to do with them. And my dad and I both were like, these are really neat. It's like, this is just so out there. And then we finally moved the last couple copies at a discount. And then, bam, Ninja Turtles blew up. We're just like, what? Oh, of course you guys blow up after we finally offload these things that wouldn't sell for a couple years. Because it took a while for them to catch on.
Yeah, it's just incredible. So and there's a tiny game called Atlas Reactor. It's a video game that came out like 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. I don't know. But it came out. It lived for like 2 or 3 years, and then it got shut down. And that was my most played game on Steam. It was like a real-time XCOM sort of thing. It was wild. It had like phases. Yeah. There's great links going on in the chat here to everything we're discussing.
Yeah, that'd be my my producer, my wife.
Thank you.
She pays attention and looks up everything we talk about.
It's just like that is the feel that I wanted to emulate with Cyberrats. So it's like, yeah, this isn't a game where if you see a bunch of aliens standing in your way, you should negotiate with them. Like, they want to conquer your planet. And there's very few times, like, playing with all these different people in RPGs, you get to the point like, oh, there's a tiger in front of you. Do I have to kill the tiger? I don't want to hurt the tiger. Like, when is that violence justified? And again, I've been reading Animorphs, and it's like, if your planet is invaded and their goal is clearly to enslave or kill you, like, we can talk about that violence being
Independence Day
necessary, but warranted, or no one's going to question like, oh, why did you kill the guy trying to take over your planet?
Yeah, exactly. Why did you shoot the burglar that was attempting to rob your home and burn it down? Well, let's start with what you just said.
I did not want any of that to happen.
Yeah. I would like to keep all my stuff, my life, in my home.
Yeah, and it's like you talked about. You said it perfectly. Like, if you're under 40, Ninja Turtles is in the water. It's influencing you if you know it or not. And these are just the influences I'm aware of. Like, there are 30 other things that I can't identify because they're just part of the background noise.
Oh, absolutely. It's just, I mean, every time I sit down to create something, it's like, I will talk about Independence Day. I remember just before that movie came out, I was in high school. Yes, I'm a couple years older than most of you. And I was actually writing a story and then about aliens coming to take over the world. And then Independence Day comes out and I was like, I hate you all. I was so mad. But, I mean, how many times has that story been told just right. in slightly different ways? Just Independence Day happened to be an action version of it versus, the day the Earth stood still or anything like that. Right. Most of them have been more sci-fi, less action. And now they're all action, no sci-fi.
Yeah.
The sci-fi is the premise, and it's just a sci-fi action flick instead of a pure sci-fi.
Yeah, the sci-fi has really changed in the past.
Yeah. Well, you can tell. I mean,
especially in the visual medium.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the Star Trek movies in the 80s and 90s, and the Jar Jar Abrams reboots. They are not even remotely, because they're not addressing the same concepts or anything. They're just fun sci-fi action flicks with a thin veneer of Star Trek pasted over them. I think the actors have all done great jobs, but Star Trek was never an action series. Right. It was contemplative, but the only contemplative movies you get anymore, they are underground indie flicks, because action flicks sell. That's why Marvel movies, all the Marvel movies are pretty much the same. I enjoyed them, but it's not movies that I'm going to go out of my way to watch it. I'm like, man, I can't wait to sit down and watch them all again. I'm like, they're all the same. You're going to spend 6 hours watching four movies back to back to back that are all basically the same film.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for, sometimes you just want like that that formula, but sometimes you do want to think, and there's like, even looking at the old Battlestar show, like, that is at times a very slow show.
The sci-fi one.
The 2003 one.
I can listen to that. I just can't watch it. The entire show is done with shaky cam.
There's some really the camera work is. I remember there's one shot, and this is getting way into the weeds, but there's one shot where these people are walking down a hallway, and the camera flips around them. Like, it does a 180 vertically over them.
And I get it, because they didn't want to break the 180 rule, but it's like, why? Like, you could that could have been so much simpler. The thing that, like, it was like first episode, they're on a ship, and they said the whole shaky cam thing on ship was to make you feel like you're on the ship. I was like, but if I'm on the ship and I'm sitting at a table with these people talking, I'm not going to be shaking with them as well. like I'm not going to be
right.
It's like it's distracting. Like, but listening to it, I was like, man, it was actually really well written, and the actors did a
Right.
great job. Just, the thing that always took me out was just the constant shaky cam, and some people
I
are like,
I can't watch The Office or Parks and Rec for the same reason. It's always zooming and like I
yeah.
just can't do it.
I like the first two seasons of Parks and Rec. I enjoyed, and I did enjoy The Office, but I found that I probably listened to The Office more than I watched it.
And listening to it, I can appreciate the humor. But just again, watching it like the constant zooming just makes it
Yeah,
impossible for me to focus.
yeah. That the I do love that they stuck really close to having that the low grade documentary effect on everything, which is just it. And even their more complex shots. So like one of the later seasons, I was talking to somebody about this recently. They go down to Florida, and the female is trying to seduce Jim and comes into his room, and somebody's like, oh well, the camera crew is there. It's like, go back and watch the scene. The camera crew is not there until Jim invites Dwight into the room to prevent anything from happening. Like all their camera shots are from outside, so they were pretty smart about keeping the feel of we're still doing a documentary, so this could happen, but we're not in the room.
Right.
Little things like that. But back to Lumen and Cyberrats, because
Yeah.
we
we're taking the long route, the scenic route. No, the other big driver, the other thing I wanted to do with Cyberrats that's different is I wanted it like I feel like RPGs largely fall into two categories. You have games that are run as a one shot, which Lumen lends itself to very well, or you have campaigns that are intended to run for a very long time. So you've got like on one hand you've got like Lady Blackbird, which is explicitly a one shot game, and on the other side you have like Band of Blades, where you're expected to run it for a long time until this campaign plays out. Or like I ran like everyone else who's played D&D, like modern D&D, I ran a Curse of Strahd game, and it took about 2 years, and there were points where I'm like, am I still having fun? Like in board games, I like to talk about games that earn their time at the table. The classic one is Munchkin. People like to call Munchkin 45 minutes of fun crammed into 2 hours. Um, there are games that earn their time at the table. Lords of Waterdeep, 45-minute game, earns every minute. Dinosaur Island, great game. There's some downtime. And you're like, okay, is this like, am I enjoying every minute of
by
this?
downtime you mean the setup?
Also, yes.
You're like setting this up like this better be the best game in the world. It's fun, but man, that's like I remember as a kid trying to play Mousetrap, and
Yeah.
nobody wanted to play it because nobody wanted to set the freaking game up. They're like, oh, this just takes too long. Let's play anything else. What else do you
Yeah.
have? On the one shots, one that my wife and I love to play, a little card game from the '90s, still for sale, Guillotine.
Yes.
I love that game so much, and it weirdly you can 20 minutes to 40 minutes for a game, because it's just 3 rounds of you being an executioner at the French execution, and you can play 5, 6, 7, 8 rounds of the games of that back to back to back, and be like, okay, man, that was a blast, and still be having fun after several games of that. So, and that's a perfect example of that kind of the one shot, cramming as much fun into one little package as possible.
Right. And that's what I wanted to do with Cyberrats, where I wanted to say, I want this to have a campaign. I want this to have a start and an end. And that's something I've been trying to do with all of my designs recently, is figure out how this is going to play. Like my other game that I released last year was Gratitude, a horror game, which again is explicitly designed around one shots. You can do a longer game, but that's not what I made it for. That's not how it's best. And with Cyberrats, I wanted a campaign game that wasn't going to take you a year to play. I wanted it to be where, like, if you have played 12 games of Cyberrats, 12 2-hour games of Cyberrats, one way or another, you're at your last session. Like, you're either about to win or about to lose. If you have not already lost, it's going to be over now. and I think designing for an endpoint is great. Like Band of Blades seems like an incredible system, and I took some inspiration from it for Cyberrats. But if I start a game of that, it's going to take a while.
Yeah, it's like we have somebody that would volunteer for the library from time to time and run one shots of Pendragon, which Pendragon's a great game, but
one shot of Pendragon.
Yeah, it's a rough thing to like. You're basically all you're doing at that point is introducing them to the basic mechanics, because that game is a game that is just you have to play this ongoing, because there are mechanics of losing limbs and eyes and like things that happen to you and they affect your character for long term, which is super cool. But
the whole conceit of Pendragon is generational.
Yes,
right. Like you're carrying like this guy has this whole fleshed out life, and then he dies, and his son takes over.
Yeah, and fingers crossed that your son character doesn't suck. Right. Because I have seen that happen a couple of times in Pendragon games. Like, yeah, my progenitor character was awesome, and I ended up with this horrible thing as an offspring. I'm just like, oh man, I feel sorry for you so much.
Yeah, and it's a tricky thing to like. Again, I run a lot of one shots, and there are some games that I will not like. I'll run them as a 3-shot because that is how they have to breathe.
Yeah. And it's funny. Well, we were talking about different type of players and stuff, and somebody had mentioned in the chat saying, so you'd said, I like to look at it as like a quadrant, because somebody else brought up the other way I look at games. So you said you got the one shot to long running game, and then you have the like no dice roll to nothing but crunchy.
Right.
So it's finding, and with that, it's great because you're somewhere in that quadrant. We can find that group, that game for you, and hopefully find you a GM and a group to go with it. And then with things like Roll20 and Virtual Tabletop and Fantasy Grounds and all the other options that are out there, to be able to find groups of people to play with, because you may want to play, as we were talking about, playing adult games, after hours, finding the right group. You may want to play, a rated X version of My Little Pony. You look hard enough, you'll find that group online. You may not find it in your town, and you may live in New York City and not be able to find that group. But I guarantee you, if you want to play rated X My Little Pony, you're gonna find 5 or 6 people online that'll be like, yeah, I'm down for that. Let's get on Zoom, or let's get on Roll20.
Yeah, there's people for everything, and that's the beauty. Like if it's 20, 30 years ago, and you're like, man, I really want to play Shadowrun, like, depends on where you live. Like, if you live in Kansas, like, you might have a couple people, but
yeah,
good luck.
Yeah, you're going down to the local game store, and if you wanted to play that, it was your job to get some other people excited to do it. And
you're probably running it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like, I want to play Shadowrun. Wonderful. You're going to put the game together and get a bunch of other people to play, and then finally teach somebody how to GM so that you can play in 4 or 5 years' time. Oh, I don't know if I want to play that bad. Because I spent a lot of time in the like I said, family had a comic book store. We also had a gaming section. We in the mid '80s, my brother and I talked my dad into putting we had a spare room in one of the shops that we had, and so we set it up as a place that people could come play RPGs, which was crazy at the time. People were like, you're going to waste the space for that. And we only charged $1 an hour for the room, so but it was the entire reason to charge the $1 was somebody put money down there, like, F it, we're showing up.
Right.
It's like, it's $2. I don't care, we're showing up.
Yeah.
But then we started selling snacks because they'd be there and they're like, hey, do you guys have more than the soda machine? We're like, why, yes we do. Here's snacks. My dad thought it was a crazy idea at first, and then the amount of snack sales we had, he was like, this is a great idea. He goes, they're taking up like no electricity, a room that we weren't using, and paying rent on. And now we have people in there every night buying snacks. Sweet.
Yeah.
But one of the things I love about sitting down, like I run basically the same Star Wars game whenever I do my one shots at events, and I've run it same game 100 times or more.
Now, what's your Star Wars system of choice? Is it
D6 Star Wars.
Okay.
Yeah. There's other Star Wars out there.
One or two.
Yeah. Yeah. The Wizards of the Coast one was. Saga was better than the original D20 one, but the D20 one, it was basically D20 Modern with psionics crammed in, and it was just so not good. But anyways,
it had some interesting mechanics, but that's
yeah.
Tell me about your one shot.
Yeah, had some great books. I love the Yuuzhan Vong books. They did a great job of taking all the legends and stuff, and I love that. But so running these one shots for West End Games, so being that they're just one shots, I really cut down the system a bunch, because the system can be a little complex, and so I really boil it down. But it's basically the same game. I start off with the same. You're in a bar, blah blah blah. Same handful of cues to start with. Same kind of midterm to end goals. And I've never had any two games out of the 100 even remotely come close. In fact, I've had a guy, he's like, I've played in a couple of these now with you, and he goes, I'm just blown away, like how dramatically different they are. I was like, it's because I'm not trying to put anybody on rails, and I want to see, I want you to experience what a role-playing session can be like, how the players can shape the game, because I give you the cues, you shape the game, and you go for it. So I always love seeing people like, well, I've never played before. One of my favorite stories is the first time we did things with the library, the first weekend, had 9 13-year-old boys, and they didn't make it out of the bar. They started a giant fight and ended up all getting killed, and they thought it was the greatest thing ever. And then the dad was super excited afterwards, because he'd been trying to figure out how to get his son excited about role-playing games, and he was like, right. You just did that. And I was like, oh.
That's got to be a great feeling.
Yeah, and it was super funny, because it's the only group I've had that didn't make it out of the bar. They all just got wiped out. It was hilarious.
I mean, it seems like empowering people to explore their own creativity is really important to you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I want more people to sit down and play RPGs. I don't care, who or what you are. I don't care where you're from. Sitting down at the table and playing a role-playing game with people you know and people you don't know can be great for you, both mentally, emotionally, creatively. It's a time away. I mean, you can get somebody that's worth $1 million, sit down with somebody that's been, in prison 3 times, and yep. You leave all that off the table, and you let them play, Jojo, the Monkey Boy Ranger of Doom, and Dakota Smith, the Paladin, whatever they want to name their characters. I suck with names. And
set up. Sorry, go ahead.
And then they get away from themselves, and they get to have a little fun. And like I said, you can develop mentally and emotionally and creatively. Hell, I know a lot of writers that play RPGs and then take notes and keys from their sessions. You're like, oh, that's a great idea. And I see writers at conventions all the time playing RPGs and taking notes of things, which cracks me up.
About halfway between you and me is the Bellevue Mall.
Yes.
And I used to just go and set up a table on weekends and just say, hey, curious about RPGs, want to know about D&D, like grab a seat. And some days I'd get no one, but other than that, you'd get just a random person. You start, as soon as the first person sits down, that's when the floodgate opens. Like the time when I was running for one person was very low. It would always be like, I'd be sitting there for an hour and no one would show up. One person would stop by, they're like, what is this? And then immediately people would be like, okay, I was waiting for someone to break that ice.
Yeah.
And just like you said, like, I mean, you've been to Bellevue, I assume, like,
yeah,
you get all sorts in that mall. And
Bellevue is an interesting place.
It is. There's a huge wealth disparity in just in that whole area, and you just get all sorts of people just who happen to be at the mall, and yeah, you never know what to expect.
Yeah. And that's cool. I haven't. So I've not done that. Like just sat at the mall, because I've done the, hey, come learn RPGs at local game stores, and I've done that, off and on over the years. I would do that at our store when I was growing up. Like, want to learn a role playing game, and I would do that with kids in school. And, back in the day, frustrating was like, hey, you want to play a role playing game? And they're like, yeah, I've always kind of interested. I was like, okay, let's play Star Wars. Oh, that's not a role playing game. That's a movie. I've heard of Dungeons and Dragons. Let's do that. Like, oh.
And
you're gonna run away screaming when I introduce you to Thaco.
Dimitri in the chat asked about Genesis. So I think Genesis started as Star Wars, and then they made it universal.
Yeah. It was Genesis. Came from the Edge of the Empire. Yeah. Then and has grown into and it is different than the Edge of the Empire game, but it's refined.
Yeah. And Edge of the Empire is very good, and I don't remember if this was before the show or after, but someone did make a Shadowrun Genesis hack as well.
Nice.
That might have been in the show. I think that was.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things I love about Savage Worlds. There's another system that, because there's two game worlds that have been ported into Savage Worlds. One is Pathfinder. So there's Pathfinder for Savage Worlds. And it's because there's a lot of people that love the Pathfinder world, but they just don't like the Pathfinder rules. I loved D&D 3 and 3.5. I didn't really like D&D 3.75. Because what I liked about 3 and 3.5 was you could make it crunchier, or you could really water it down to get people playing. But Pathfinder, they went full crunch. Once you go full crunch, it's really hard to rein that in. Right. And they made a really cool world, so they just ported that over to Savage Worlds, and they did the same thing with Rifts, which, like I was saying earlier, there's people that have problems with the Rifts rules, but man, Kevin Symbieta and all the writers that have worked with him over the years, I mean, because they've been creating that world since 1989, and only minor adjustments to the rules. Technically, you can pick up a first edition rulebook and use it with modern rules. There'll be some minor differences, but nothing crazy. But they ported that over to Rifts, or over to Savage Worlds, and now more people can experience that world, but in a much friendlier system.
Yeah.
I love it. I love the Savage World system too, because it comes from one of my favorite systems, Deadlands. Okay. The original Deadlands is where you can see, because when Deadlands Minis, or the Pinnacle did a Minis game, and then they started doing the Savage World stuff, and you can see the evolution, because the original Deadlands has like 10 stats, new one has I think 6, and you can see where they combined. Because they had like smarts and knowledge and something else in there. Now those 3 stats are 2 stats versus 3, and they merged a whole lot of stats that were very duplicated in the original system down to a few, but they kept poker chips. There's still a whole bunch of things that are very Deadlands-esque in that system, and you're like, oh, if you've played Deadlands, you can pick that system up and go, oh man, I totally see where this came from.
Right. Yeah, like I said, it's a legacy thing, and it's hard to do right. And sometimes the answer is porting it. I mean, I don't want to get controversial, but there's a big hullabaloo about Doctor Who releasing a 5e version. A few years ago, Iron Kingdoms released a 5e version.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's no better way to get eyes on what you're doing.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that are doing 5e stuff just because 5e is so big, and I don't begrudge them for that, and I don't mind that they're doing it. It just like with Doctor Who, you look at the original, the more recent original system.
Cubicle 7.
Yeah, and I think it was Cubicle 7. Wait, no, Cubicle 7 I think is doing the 5e one.
Maybe.
Yeah, but whoever it was,
I also have one, but
so yeah, there's the one that was out. It was, I think it was I forget what system. I think it might have been Cubicle 7, and I think Cubicle 7 is doing the 5e one as well.
Okay. They just have
But
a license.
yeah, but I think the last system was a better system than 5e. 5e has a lot of issues. It is really easy to get people to understand the mechanics and get them started, but it does struggle on a lot of long-term issues. Especially on the.
I mean, the existing one has really good mechanics around chasing, and like most combats end in a chase. 5e as written, doesn't like it. Yeah. It wants you to fight. Like that's what
exactly. And Doctor Who's not a fighting system,
right?
It's why what I've pointed out to most people, most modern systems, your best modern systems tend to be spy games because you're actively not trying to get into a fight. You don't want to get caught. You don't want to get because in modern times, guns versus unarmored people, not really fights end pretty quick.
Right.
Whereas sci-fi and fantasy, running around in armor, totally normal. I've got a personal force field. Haha. There's a million ways to make combat a thing in fantasy or sci-fi. Whereas in modern, if you're running around in armor, you stick out like a sore thumb.
Right. And that's something that I really like about The Expanse. I don't know how familiar you are with The Expanse, but like that's something that they deal with well, where like they talk about how like if you're boarding a ship, like it's not unusual to have 60-80% casualties. Like that is not something that you want to do. The other person is I can't remember but they're ground in. They're
the defender has the advantage.
Yeah. And they don't want to let you in. It's just like we were talking about. Like, why are you stopping the alien? This is my home.
Yeah.
I live here.
Contrary to popular belief, stormtroopers are actually really good shots. So them boarding the Tantive 4 in a New Hope and only losing a couple guys coming through the door initially is pretty unusual for something like that. The Alderanian guards there, just getting lit up, but they were all unarmored versus armored stormtroopers, and they.
No, the armor didn't seem to help too much.
No, yeah, you got to really dive really deep into the lore to figure out what the hell the stormtrooper armor actually does. Not much is.
It doesn't help against lasers or rocks. So.
Yeah, it's like, what is your armor for? I will agree that like there's nothing in the anywhere in the movies that defend the armor, but the movies themselves, stormtroopers are good shots. They just they look like bad shots because they're hurting the main characters.
Yeah. But I don't know. We were talking about like passive influences. I just realized I might have to update my influences for Cyberrats because I think The Expanse is actually an area where I drew from. Because one of the big themes of The Expanse is humanity failing to work together in face of a bigger threat. Like at the beginning, it's like the Martians and the Belters and the Earthers are all fighting each other, and then they discover this thing. I don't want to get into Expanse spoilers, but they discover a thing that like might be alien. I'm like, hey, we should all get together and agree to destroy that. I'm like, why don't you destroy it? And while you're distracted, I'll destroy you. And it's like, whoa, what? If we don't destroy that, we all die.
Yeah.
And they can't. They're incapable of doing that, and that's a theme throughout all of the Expanse.
It's a theme throughout history. I mean, look, leading up to many wars, people like, oh no, it's fine. Okay, nope, not fine anymore. And usually there's a breaking point where everybody finally figures out, hey, we got to work together to defeat the bad guy, whether it be Hitler or Napoleon or everybody's like, no, nope, too late.
We talked about Munchkin. Munchkin is there's a point in every game of Munchkin about an hour before it ends where one person is about to win. And
somebody looks over and goes, "Oh, you've got 9 points."
Yeah, But it's like okay, I'm gonna beat the gazebo. I win, and then when it says, hang on, we're not gonna let you win, but we have to decide who does it. Because whoever stops you from winning is going to lose.
Yeah, like they're gonna they're probably gonna take next to last right behind you.
Right, like so it's like no one wants to be the one to stop you.
Yeah,
but someone will stop you.
Same in Settlers of Catan. You look at somebody over there counting, and you're like, hey, guys, he's about to win, and then no one wants to trade with you anymore.
Right.
Everyone's like, you become the pariah of the group. You're just like, I hate you all. And then what's really funny is when the guy that calls you out, you look over like, I got 8 points, he's got 9. You're really gonna call me out? Like, no, it just looks like I got 9. No.
It's not like that.
You're really good at this.
and that is like explicitly a theme of Cyberrats. Is like you are working for a megacorp. This other megacorp will defeat the aliens. Like they're going to. If you do nothing, they beat the aliens, and that's a lose condition for you. Because that makes your stock price go down. Yeah,
because not only does humanity have to win, but you have to be the one that wins for humanity.
Right.
I like that.
Like, explicitly, like there are 2 ways to lose the game, and it is the aliens win, or the other people defeat them. So you explicitly have to go in and sabotage the more competent megacorp and stop them from winning.
Sweet. Did I make one of the more competent megacorps?
So it's like that is a theme of like how can we be so blinded? Like it doesn't matter who gets credit. It matters that Earth is still here tomorrow.
Yeah.
And that's something I explicitly wanted to be in the text of the game. You know, that something that I'm going to pick on Warhammer for a second. Warhammer 40K specifically. That gets a lot of flack from people who are like, oh, how are people missing the point and think that this is like a pro-fascism game, or how do people think that this is like that the Emperor is good, and how do people? And it's like the text of the game, the text of the world, the text of, I mean, the books a little bit do, but the text of what you're playing, the fantasy game, you know, the miniatures game, doesn't condemn this.
Yeah.
Like, if you look at this and you're like, okay, yeah, they're all serving this Emperor, like the text of that doesn't condemn. Now, if you read into it and you're like, okay, but they're all willing to blindly die for this guy who needs 10,000 souls sacrificed to him every day, like that's comically evil. Like it doesn't take a lot of critical thinking to be like,
but if you read, like they've done a really good job of, because it's one of the things I love about the lore is they're sacrificing 10,000 psychers. Psychers aren't all that prevalent in humanity. Yes, there's billions upon trillions of people that in the Imperium, so they're constantly harvesting these poor psychers. But if they don't do that, then the Golden Throne shuts down and all warp travel ceases to exist, and humanity can't interconnect with each other. So you can't get from one world to the next. And it's like, okay, we have to sacrifice 10,000 people a day to continue to have our interstellar spaceways. Okay, right. Okay, we can do that. It's like, you know, and you think about these crazy, you know, stuff like that, and it's like, you know, if you lived in that system, one, vast majority of people in the system probably have no idea any of that's going on.
Right.
It's like most of the evil things that happen in the world, most people have no clue that's going on.
Right.
So that's the, you know, when we get to try to call out, you know, the comically over the top stuff in Warhammer, one, that's the entire nature of the Warhammer universe. Yes. There is only war. So
yes.
if the Golden Throne shuts down and, you know, you can't travel, that means Space Marines can't get to your planet and save you when the demons or the orcs or the Eldar or the right. Dark Eldar or, you know, insert next oncoming thing that is trying to devour your world. You're like, yeah, we got a couple thousand psychers on the planet we're willing to give you just to make sure that the
All
Space
yours.
Marines can get here to make sure that we can get. No, I don't want Tyranids coming eating my face. I don't want to be kidnapped by Dark Eldar and kept alive for the next 400 years in agony. Nope, 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 nope,
Right.
nope, nope, nope.
And I think that's valid, but like, yeah, and I can easily imagine a Twitter exchange, if you will, from the Imperium, of someone saying, "How can we allow 10,000? Like, they're clearly evil. They're killing 10,000 psychers a day. Like, what is this?" And someone else being like, "Oh, so you just want the Space Marines to not be able to travel?" It's like,
Exactly.
"No,
You want
I
the
want
warp
them
to
for a
come and
better
engulf
way."
your home?
Right. And it's like, "No, I want a better way." And it's like, "Well,
Yeah.
do you have a better way? Then we have to keep killing them." Like,
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually one of the things I always loved about the Warhammer universe is it is crazy over the top. There is all these horrible things that are being done in the name of humanity. I love that humanity is totally afraid of technology, and there's a great explanation why. And like they've done a good job of closing so many loopholes with even more over the top insanity. So it's like the loopholes are this big, but they're plugged with these giant corks of nope, 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 nope,
yeah.
nope.
And it's not everything has to be explained, but if you're going to explain everything, like, go big. You
Yeah.
know?
And that's what the Warhammer universe has been great at. Go big.
There's a thing that I love in Terry Pratchett books that he doesn't overuse it, but he uses it just enough where he'll make a reference to something very modern, or he'll say something like a room is Spartan, and then he'll have a little footnote and be like, this doesn't refer to the Spartans of Athens because those didn't exist.
Yeah.
It's named after John Spartan, who famously and
Yeah.
he has this like in-universe thing where he's like, I want to use this modern thing, and I'm going to apologize for it, but in a way that just says screw you, let me do it.
Exactly. And it's like, no. I've got an in-universe. And another guy, Douglas Adams,
Yes.
he went off on tangents that made no sense in the book, but drew you into the world. And I think some stories miss that, because I'll be honest, there's a ton of stuff in the Warhammer universe that doesn't need to be there, but just draws you in. It's like,
Yes.
like this is awesome. Like, why is this a thing? And it's like, because you're reading it right now, that's why it's a thing.
Yes. And that's I'm gonna talk about lore. I love lore. I love it. It's good. It's the reason why I want to tell a story in Star Wars instead of generic open D6. It's like,
Yeah.
But if I'm reading an RPG, and I do see some questions in the chat, but if
Yeah, we'll get to them.
I teach a lot of RPGs, and one of the things that's hardest is if I pick up a book, I'm picking up Blades because that's what I have on hand. If I pick up Blades in the Dark, and if a third of this book is lore that I need to read in order to play the game, now this one isn't. This is actually a pretty good example of how the lore is. But if a third of that is lore that I need to read, understand, and communicate, that's a challenge. That becomes difficult. There you go. And so
I'm actually enjoying these.
I've heard good things. I have
Yeah.
not played, but I've heard good things. But with Cyberrats, I did not want to get into a place where you have to read and internalize 20 pages of lore.
Yeah.
My goal was to summarize everything you need to know on one page and not give you more. I think we have like 3 or 4 pages of lore that might go up to 9 depending on where our layout is. It's like, we're not going to have more than 10 pages of lore.
Yeah.
Because we want to paint a picture with broad strokes and let you fill it in. We want to get you playing as fast as possible.
Yeah. Well, because like the corp that I help build, I mean, we went back and forth and got 2-3 paragraphs,
Yeah.
and that's honestly, you read through it and you know a ton about the founder and the corporation, and that's enough for you to go, I know what they're about, I know where they're going to go, and I know how to incorporate them into the story.
And we try to do a lot with flavor text. We try to do a lot with very small, with small text in it that isn't just, okay, now read and internalize this 30 pages. I love Eberron, but I'm not going to pick up the Eberron book and just read through it and learn that. if you tell me a story in the Eberron world, I can start to figure this out, and I can be like, oh,
Yeah, I've always loved the Eberron setting. I have not read a single bit of the actual lore.
right. You have to be exposed to it in the terms of the story. That's how humans communicate.
Yes.
And it's like I can pick up a book, like I can pick up the Dresden Files RPG, and I can run that because I've read the books and I've learned that lore. If it was just
I've never read the Dresden File books. I've only watched the TV show.
It's very different, but like if it was a book this, this is Sentinel Comics. If it was this big, and it was like, here's everything you need to know about the Dresden Files world, then like I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
You know.
That was actually one of the things I thought was like you go open the Warhammer 40K rulebook for years. Like half of it was, and GW hates it when people say this, fluff.
Yeah.
And the other, and the other half was diagrams and rules. And you could legit just skip past all the fluff, learn the rules, and then as you play over the years, someone that you're playing with is going to tell you all the fluff that you need to know.
Yep. And it's a challenge that I have with Star Wars because I get people who, like, I'll be like, I'm running a Star Wars game, and I get people who are like, I don't really want to play, and I'm like, wait, I thought you liked Star Wars, and they're like, well, I do, but I don't know it well enough to play a game. And I'm like, look, I'm not gonna be the guy who's like, oh, well, actually, since we're on this planet, gravity is 2/3, so that doesn't,
Yeah.
As long as we have like Star Wars is a shared language. Like, if you come up and you're like, hey, this Star Wars thing seems interesting, I want to play a Wookiee and I'm going to be a Jedi and I'm going to talk in English, I'm going to be like, well, here's why that's unusual. If you want to do that, we'll work it out. But I'm not going to be like, no, if you're going to be a Chewbacca, you can't talk.
Actually, that's one of the things I do love about stuff like there's a handful of species like Wookiees. I'm like, nope, you're not allowed to speak. Because it add to me preventing someone that wants to play a Wookiee, preventing them from like, hey, you can understand Common, but you can't speak it. You just don't have the vocal cords for it. It means somebody else in the group has to be with you. And it's great because someone will like, oh yeah, I understand Wookiee, and then they're off doing something else. So the Wookiee's now trying to do charades,
right?
And everybody's like, oh god, this is so rough. But
it's an incredible experience as long as they know what they're signing up for. Which
yes,
I always want to say, like, here's why that's unusual. If you want to do that, go ahead. If you're like, I want to be a big fluffy guy, but I don't want that limitation, this isn't that kind of game. Like,
yeah.
I'm not.
Here, let me find. Well, and at that point, I'll try to just to stay in the canon the canon of Star Wars to keep everyone, because it is a shared language. I'll try to help them find another species to play or something. But
I would just say, you know what? You have an implant. You have a translator implant.
Yeah,
fine.
And there's exactly. And one guy, he had a little droid translator belt.
Yeah.
So he was a Wookiee running around with a belt that translated everything he said. It was actually pretty hilarious. So we've gotten around it, things like that. And you have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to be clear. And like, there's.
But as a GM, that's also because it gives me a chance to break his communicator.
Exactly. It's an opportunity.
And then everyone's staring, going, "I don't know what you're saying."
Well, and I love that shared language, but you have to communicate just enough. You don't want to be like, okay, here, if you're going to play a Wookiee, here's 5,000 years of lore you need to know.
No.
It's like,
you're a big fuzzy creature that's really strong, can understand Common, doesn't speak it. That's kind of the extent that you really need to know.
Well, and there's one other thing that I really like to introduce one-on-one, and it's the result of a plot hole. We were talking about filling plot holes. I love this one. In Empire Strikes Back, there's like a scene, and I don't remember which one it is, but there's a scene where like Chewbacca could have like used his claws to like attack someone, and didn't. And someone wrote a letter to like George or someone, and it was like, hey, why didn't Chewbacca use his claws here? And it went up the chain, and maybe it went up to George, and he was like, oh shoot, I have no idea. So then in the next Star Wars Encyclopedia, they added an entry that was like, oh, it's forbidden for Wookiees to use their claws in violence. Like that's frowned upon.
Yeah, well, that's I love stuff like. Well, and most people don't. One of the reasons why I really do have a huge affinity for the Star Wars D6 system is, one, it's a good system. Two, Star Wars was dead when they released. So they came out in
Yeah.
'87 because Return of the Jedi came out in '84. I think it was '83 or '84, and then you had the Droids cartoon that was basically a failure. The two Ewok movies that were basically failures, and by '87 there were no Star Wars toys on the shelves. No one was talking about Star Wars, and then you have this game that comes out, and these nerds sit down, and their stipulation with Lucas was they couldn't go before before A New Hope. So they just went scene by scene, frame by frame, named every species, every character, anything that wasn't already named. It's like, oh, here's the toy for Hammerhead. Oh, no, that's an Ithorian. And here's his name, and here's his background, here's his world. And, like, all of the deep lore that we talk about now came from a role-playing game.
Yeah.
So, and it's just, it's fascinating that, we have this shared language of Star Wars that the bulk of what the fandom really absolutely loves. We love the original 3 movies. Almost everybody I know that loves Star Wars loves most of the legend novels, many of the legend novels, and all the legend novels. When Timothy Zahn was sitting down to write those, he was sent the original West End game books to start from there. And some of the other writers were as well. A.C. Crispin, I was told she was given a whole bunch of the Star Wars role-playing game books to learn the lore and build the world of young Han Solo. And, and then she was like, she read something about a Togorian and then threw Togorians into her story. And so Luke has an experience with Wookiees, then moves on to Togorians, then goes back to Wookiees, and it's like, so he's like, Han is a cat and dog man.
Right. No, I just think, I want to go back to the claw thing for a moment.
Yeah.
If that's an expectation of like, hey, this is like really frowned upon, that becomes a tool that they can, Jay Dragon had a great article where they named different mechanics, and one of them was the dagger, which is a mechanic that you want to use but should never use. And like that becomes that, where it's like, if the Wookiee pulls out their claws and attacks them with their claws, you go, like, you understand what you're doing, you're sure? And they're like, yeah. Everyone at the table sighed. Like, everyone at the table gasped, and it was like, oh my goodness.
Like, okay, how crazy is this moment?
Right. And it's because you have that shared understanding, and that is what Star Wars enables you to do. If you have that, I just don't want it to be a barrier. That's my one concern.
And kind of like one of my favorite games in Star Wars was a 3-year-long game, and we had a Charger fan. So the little bat-looking creature that grabs the blue milk off the bar in A New Hope. That's a Charger fan. And
I had no idea.
Yeah. So we've got somebody that's playing one of those. He's our mechanic. And in Star Wars, you've got to have a quote. And you get bonuses for actually using your quote properly. So, like, I've got a really bad feeling about this. And you just can't throw it in. Well, his was, I have a hammer. And he literally had a hammer. And he would show it to us all the time. It's like, what can you do? I got a hammer. And so I'm playing Togorian. I'm a combat Gumby, for the group. And we're about to get attacked by like 7 dudes. I'm like, I look down. I'm like, I can take 5. What can you do? He goes, I got a hammer. I was like, if we survive this, I'm going to beat you with that hammer. And then he just reaches over and lights his freaking hammer's a lightsaber. So we're playing right during Empire Strikes Back. So Jedis are like, you've got to, if you know the lore, you've got to play a Jedi super hidden. And 3 years of playing, that's nearly twice a week that we were playing with this guy. And everyone sitting at the table is like, what? Like, none of us had a clue he was a Jedi. And just pulls it out on us. We're just like, and he proceeds to just light these dudes up. And he looks at me, he's like, you can tell no one. I was like, what? And then we go back. Every time he used his little quote, I have a hammer. So our GM was great. We'd always pass notes. He was passing notes about doing force powers and stuff when he said, I got a hammer. So he's like, I got a hammer. And he would pass notes and stuff. And he was like, I'm doing this. And none of us, 3 years of games with this guy, none of us caught it. And it was like, what? Like, and I mean, still to this day, it just breaks my mind that, but because of that shared knowledge of the lore, the time frame that we were playing, we all knew that nobody could be a Jedi in our group because Jedi kind of extinct.
Right.
What? You're a Jedi? Because none of us expected it, because he would just wrench on things and occasionally help us out with stuff. We thought he was kind of a useless character. Then we start realizing that no, he's been. Oh my God! Did you use a force power here? He's like, yes. We're like, oh my God! We got out of that situation. I thought I just rolled really well.
That's so good. And like, I have so much respect. We were talking at the top of the chat. Like, I can't keep a secret for more than an hour. Like,
yeah. Yeah, 3 years, and none of us had a clue he played that character so well. And the GM, he and the GM kept that secret for so long, and did such a great job. And the GM forced him into a situation where he had to reveal himself, and it was priceless, because we played for another few months after that. But I mean, it was. Like, everyone's staring at him, and the hilarious thing is, like, he and I were alone, so everybody else sitting at the table knows, but we can't tell. I can't tell the other characters in character that this guy, like, I now have a secret that everyone out of character knows, but their characters don't know, and it's like, I can't say anything because I promised him I wouldn't, and if I say anything, maybe someone will turn him in and he'll get killed. It's like, all the ramifications in character were insane, and it made that game. I mean, to this day, I mean, that was 20 plus years ago, and I still remember like the reactions that everybody at the table had. It was so impactful.
You're making me want to break out my Star Wars D6 games.
Let's get to some of the questions here. So
we've got a few in the chat.
One that we get from one of our Patreon donors always, hot dogs or tacos?
Tacos.
Okay.
I'm not a huge fan of either. Like, my go-to Mexican is burritos, but I think if it was hot dog or tacos in front of me, tacos.
A burrito could be a form of taco, but we also joke that a hot dog could be a form of taco.
Oh, see, that's a whole different thing.
Because the bun is wedge shaped, and then you just put the meat in there, and a lot of times you're putting, I've seen people put salsas on hot dogs and stuff. So, hot dog is only a half step away from a taco.
I will say this: whenever I travel, there's a hot dog stand in the Denver airport that does the weirdest hot dogs you've ever seen. Like, they have a Chicago dog, they have your standard, they have a Denver dog that is a burrito. Like, it's a hot dog that they fill with burrito ingredients.
Okay.
And it's really, I'll say this, it's a gamble. Like, if you're traveling and you're going with a hot dog and a burrito in an airport, like, at once, like, you're rolling all the dice.
I hope you have a seat near the bathroom on the plane. So I thought you were gonna go because the tortilla, the flour tortilla that we think of, actually originates out of like Scandinavia, and the Scandinavians have like a tortilla wrapped or like a flatbread wrapped hot dog that's sausage that they've done for a long time, and finding, I was like, this is. When I was in college, I was a history and anthropology major, so I was doing this paper on like the history of I was tracking like kebabs, and basically you can kind of trace kebabs from like northern Africa and the Middle East up, and how they kind of becomes sausages and hot dogs and wurst and stuff. So, and you can kind of track that through history. It's actually really, I thought, was kind of fascinating. And then
fascinating.
Yeah. And then you find out, hey, the Scandinavians been doing these basically tortillas that we think of as tortillas. They've been doing something like that for ages, and then they've been putting hot dogs into tortillas for a couple hundred years, and was like, what? This is the weirdest thing. And then some of the toppings they put on it, you're just like, well, this is weird. I'm gonna try it. Some of them taste good, some of them not so much.
I mean, if you're traveling, especially, you have to try the local food.
Oh yeah.
Like, you paid all this money to get somewhere new, You gotta live like it.
Just got back from Ukraine in December, and they have what we call all the Americans I was there with, we called it a pocket dog, and I would actually love to start a food truck with them here. So instead of a bun, it's like a tube, a bread tube, and they're all pre-made, and then they take them and they put them on like a panini press, but then they have a little spike that they put the bread on, and then they close the press, so it's toasting the inside of this tube, and it's closed off at the bottom, and then they're toasting the outside, and then when that's done, they put like ketchup, mustard, whatever inside, and then they take the whatever type of hot dog, you pick one of the 4 or 5 different types of hot dogs, and you put them in there, and they just they mix all the condiments around, and they hand it to you. Now you have this like perfectly eatable hot dog in a bread pocket as you walk around.
That sounds incredible.
They're awesome. I would love to. I mean, imagine doing a food truck. You got like 5 different breads and like 5 different hot dogs. You could do like a croissant with an egg and cheese sausage in it for breakfast. I mean, the possibilities are endless. And I was like, why are these not a thing elsewhere? Like when I try to search them up, they take a while to find them, but yeah. They were all around the streets in Ukraine, and they're genius. I love them.
If you start that food truck, hit me up. I will be in line.
Yeah. We called them pocket dogs. So if you ever see a food truck called Pocket Dog,
I'll keep my eye out next time I'm in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, I've got a couple people like, oh yeah, you should do that. I would throw money at it. I was like, God, you know how hard it is to run a restaurant business?
It's a story. You get a story.
Yeah. A lot of people talking about lore. Somebody said they love the Ewok movies.
I see a question from Eric.
Yeah, I'm getting to Eric. See, Eric is usually on. He shared some stuff with us. See, you run Discord where you teach strangers to play a wide variety of indie games. How does an indie player's willingness to try unique systems affect your GMing style? How do you GM these players differently than you would playing a traditional hack and slash fantasy RPG?
That is a great question and kind of a big one.
Eric likes the big questions.
I love this question. It's hard because I have to like zoom out. At a certain point, some of this is like internalized to the point where it's subconscious. But what I try to do is when I read through a new game, I try to figure out what that game does well and what it tries to do. And I try to make each game shine. So maybe it's because of my Discord, maybe I'm self-selecting for people who have similar desires, but I almost never have a problem with people who say, oh, I only want to play 5e, or I don't want to do this. Now, it's impossible to predict what people want to play. Whenever I post on Twitter about the Margaret Weiss Marvel RPG, whenever I post about that, I get a bunch of replies from people saying, oh, I love this game, I want to play it, I'll do it anytime. And that usually translates to 3 or 4 people joining my Discord. Whenever I post about it in the Discord, I get the same one guy signing up for it every time, and that's it. And I'm like, where are these people coming from that are so passionate about it until it's time to play?
Yeah. Well, it's like anything that you have signups online. You remember the Coney 2012 stuff back in 2012. Like, we've got 100,000 people that are going to show up, and they're like 11 showed up. It's anytime any of that stuff happens, like, well, we've got 100,000 people saying they're going to show up, and it's like, well, did they pay for tickets to be here? Because if they just say they're going to show up, I guarantee you're going to get 0.5%.
It's like you were saying, once the money is on the table, you can sell the snacks.
Exactly. Yeah. Even if it's just something as little as $1, it's because if they have nothing invested in it, then they have nothing invested in it, and they like, whatever, not important.
No, I almost never have a problem with that outside of the Margaret Weiss RPG. I've tried to run that one 3 or 4 times, and it does not come to table. but I really do. I change how I run a game depending on what it is. Like, one thing that I do is I always write or run a pre-made adventure, and if the one in the book is not good, I'll write my own. And that I love that because then, like you were saying, you've been running the same Star Wars D6 game for years and years and years, hundreds of times, and it always goes differently. One of my favorite games to run is Bubble Gumshoe. Bubble Gumshoe is Veronica Mars, the game. You
Yes.
are a bunch of high school students solving petty crimes, and
We've got a
the
copy in the
adventure.
library.
Yeah, it's very good. It's so good. It's out of print right now.
Oh,
It's
really?
just so good. Yeah, you can get the PDF, but the physical copy is
Yeah.
out of print. And one thing that it does just beautifully is how the social combat works. So I try to set up a situation where people want to get in social combat. Unfortunately, the pre-made adventure that comes in the book is not very good. The book itself is great. That adventure is called it's called Hey, That's My Bike. And it is about someone who got a bike stolen. It's like a 30 or 40 page adventure. It's meant to be a one shot. It has like 25 named characters, and it's too much to keep track of.
Oh, geez.
There's so
Yeah.
many moving parts.
Yeah, that's not a
You
one
can't
shot.
do it. It's not a one shot.
No.
It might be a good long term campaign. It's too big.
Yeah.
But having that in there is invaluable. Like, I throw out everything they do, but being able to look through and see, okay, here's how they expect this to go. Here are the beats that they follow. I can cut that out and make something that is smaller and able to be run in one shot, and that has a number of characters that are manageable. And to specifically talk about Bubble Gumshoe, and one thing I do there that I would never do in a hack and slash fantasy game is when I get one of the clues that people do. So the game that I run is basically someone is distributing fake nudes of someone else in the high school, and they need to find out who and why.
It's actually a perfect setting for modern. Yeah, nobody cares that you stole unless they stole your e-bike.
Right.
Because that's
Right.
$3,000. Like, okay, somebody stole my e-bike. I'm gonna find him. I'm gonna hurt him.
Um, but one thing I do in this is as they're finding these clues, they want to find out, well, who has the ability to Photoshop this, and I give them a list, and they get a list of names, and then they say, well, wait a minute, these photos are coming from this person's Instagram account, which is on private. Who can follow that Instagram account? And I give them a list of names, and both times the list is like 8 to 10 people. And usually there's like, the only person who crosses over on the list is one of the PCs. And there's a moment where they're like, I didn't do this. No, okay. We can throw that out. But there's a moment where there's a dead end, and then it lets the players feel really clever. Because they look at the names, there's nothing in common except these two people share a last name. They're brother and sister. Well, that's the next thread. And like, it's something where, in Bubble Gumshoe, in all Gumshoe games, you have to give the players the essential clues.
Yes.
And it feels like your person is putting them together. You're like, oh, I'm gonna search the computer. And it's like, well, here's what you find.
Yeah, it's not like a Sherlock Holmes novel where you have half the clues, and then when you start reading Sherlock, it's like, well, I noticed that because he's left-handed, or he can't be part of left-handed club because he shaves his right sideburn too high. Well, that description was never given in the book, so you can't figure out who the bad guy is because you're missing pieces, but you have to give the pieces that the players can, and that's one of the hardest parts about playing spy gumshoe games is giving them the pieces without giving them the ending.
Yes, and that's why I love the that cross referencing that I do is because that takes it out of being your players being your characters being really smart and gives you the moment to be like, wait a minute, I see this. And I've run that game 3 or 4 times. I've never had someone fail to pick up on that. But if they did, if they wanted to leave, I'd be like, hey, look at those names again. But I've never had to, and I love that. It lets them feel clever. And there's the classic D&D thing of like, do I give my player a riddle? And if so, like, can the wizard roll, to solve the riddle, or do they,
Yeah, well, and the rough thing with like playing characters in a gumshoe game, the players are choosing to play a game that they've got to solve something. But playing D&D, you're playing characters that are probably either less or more clever than you. So,
yes.
Hey, just because the jock over there is playing the wizard doesn't mean that he's going to get the puzzle that the wizard should get right off the bat. And then you got the nerd over there playing the barbarian going, I get this. We're like, well, your character doesn't. Like, your character can't even read.
Right.
Right.
And I just, so that's something that I do for Bubble Gumshoe, and I try to do something similar for every game that I run, where I say, what makes this game shine? What are people looking for when they play this game, and what does it enable? And then I build a campaign where that is either what happens constantly or what happens at the climax. What is the coolest part where you can do this? So with Bubble Gumshoe, I let you feel like a detective, and then we get to have this social combat where you get to just slam down on the person who did this and expose them to everyone. And it's just beautiful.
You were saying you wanted to play the Margaret Weis Marvel. So most people haven't played that version of Marvel. They've played.
Correct.
They know of the TSR one,
yes.
and I think we have all the books for the Margaret Weis one. And so,
really?
I guarantee you we can.
So hard to find.
Yeah, every time I see a copy, I think we have 2 of the core. I even have like the Wolverine book. Like, there's a couple of the books that are like super impossible to find that have been donated to us.
The X-Men one didn't really get print. I've seen a few copies.
Yeah, we've got a copy.
Collection. I really want the X-Men one and the Civil War. It's a good system. I can't get it.
Yeah. And I've actually talked with Margaret Weis. I was trying to get her to come on to do one of these with us, and she's like, I don't really do interviews, so I don't know. She goes, I like what you're doing, and hey, if we can send you anything, let me know. But not really into the doing interviews. And I was like, I would love her to come on and talk about writing Dragonlance stuff, creating that world, and getting into publishing some kind of off the wall stuff, because honestly, when she was publishing the Marvel stuff, that was a little out there. Superhero stuff was kind of dead.
Yeah,
it had its heyday in the 80s and early 90s with TSR, and then by the time, because when did that was like 04, I think I forget when she. When she produced the Marvel the Marvel RPG.
Oh, no, that was later. That was like 08, I think.
So I mean, that was just as
it might have even been 2010 or 2012. That was later.
2012. Oh, it was later than I thought. I thought it was earlier than that. I had to look it up. I couldn't remember.
Because I remember I bought that. That was the first indie RPG that I bought. Revealing my age. Like I'd been D&D for so long, and like I had some Pathfinder, some Shadowrun, but that was the first one that was like not one of the big publishers. Where I walked into my game store and I said, "Huh," and I picked it up, and like a week later I found out that it was out of print, and I was like, "Okay." I got like the last copy.
Yeah. Well, and then looking at the games that she produced under the Margaret Weis Productions. Firefly, Battlestar Galactica, Demon Hunters, Supernatural, Smallville, Marvel, and then the 2014 Firefly, because the Serenity role-playing game didn't do well. Let's try Firefly.
The Demon Hunters game is really interesting too.
It is, and I think all of them are. I think all of their stuff was based on the Cortex system, if I recall correct.
Demon Hunters was Fate.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was the same one.
It's
the one I'm thinking
No, I've got a copy, so I had to pull it up. No, it's
Sure.
it says it's a Cortex system, but I've got a copy of this particular one in. But I think there might be another Demon Hunters.
Yeah, I might have a different one. Okay. Well, that's neat. I really like the Cortex system. It's
Yeah.
really clever. I think I've got the core book around here somewhere too. And the art is just so good in Cortex Prime.
Yeah. Yeah, I liked the Cortex system. It was a pretty solid system. I had fun with it in. I played Serenity, and it's funny because I didn't realize that Firefly was. I thought it was done by an entirely different company, but here it is. 9 years later, we're redoing it, and it's the same system, the same company, but we're gonna use the better known name.
Yeah.
That's actually kind of funny. I think we got a bunch of the newer Firefly stuff. I love the Firefly world. Just I find many of the fans insufferable.
That happens with a lot of things.
Like,
Honestly.
oh, it was Fox's fault that the show didn't do well. It's like, to be honest, the show just hit at the wrong time. I was like, because if the show would have been had the fan following that you claim when it was on the air, the Firefly movie would have not lost money.
Yeah.
Because it didn't even bring in half its budget at the theaters. It was like, oh. And you know what? I love the Firefly. I love the TV show. I love the movie. And people are like, oh, we need more Firefly episodes. I was like, no, we don't need more Firefly. We need if you're going to go back to that world, do another ship. The same way, because you had Star Trek, then you had Star Trek: The Next Generation, then Deep Space Nine. They're all different. They're all in the same world, but they're different ships or space stations. And if you're going to go back to that Firefly, well, don't bring if you bring the original cast back, do a quick cameo or something. That's it. Their story's done.
Yep.
Next question. Let's see. After you release a new indie RPG, what is it like to observe someone else take the helm GMing one of your systems?
So Cyberrats is my third big RPG that I've done. I've done a couple smaller ones in there. I'm not sure I've actually watched anyone else run one of my games.
Well, we're going to have to remedy that.
Yeah. Now, I will say I did a ton of. So Spencer Campbell's other system was Slayers. That was his first big system, which I love Slayers. It's extremely hackable, and I have released a ton of third-party content for Slayers. And my most popular adventure for that is, I promise I'm answering the question. My most popular adventure for that is called Cretaceous Skate Park. Which is an adventure about a bunch of rude teenagers. You have to go and convince a bunch of rude teenagers to help you solve a kidnapping case. And there's dinosaurs at their skate park, and you have to help them solve this. But you have to deal with the dinosaur problem before they come and help you. And it's just a very silly, very fun adventure. It's extremely popular with fans of Slayers. In fact, I don't have solid numbers on this, but I believe it's one of the better selling third-party supplements for Slayers. Possibly even the best selling. It has more than 1,000 downloads, which seems high. But that one is really popular, and I've seen some people run that, and it is just really it's just really satisfying to watch people run this adventure. That's a tightly scripted one shot. I've done some that are more open-ended, like you were talking about with your Star Wars one. This one's a little more tightly scripted, and it's just really satisfying to watch people go and play this and hit these beats and see these moments. It's a very funny, very silly game. Ultimately, the evil villain is turning people into dinosaurs, because that's very funny. But it's a very funny, very silly thing, and we don't have to take ourselves too seriously. But that is just really satisfying to watch people run that and go through it. And that's probably the closest that I've gotten is watching people or hearing people recount their stories, because there is that shared experience of we're all going through the same story, we're all hitting the same notes, in a very Wordle sort of way, where it's like, oh, I can see your colored dots, and I can get a narrative out of that, and I can see where you struggled, and I can see where you did it. It's like, oh, I just got made fun of by a teenager. Oh, well, how did the GM, what insults did the GM throw at these people as the teenagers? What is your take on teenagers bullying a grown adult who hunts monsters for a living? Like, that's just, it's a very funny thing to witness.
The premise isn't funny, but it is funny because you're just like, how is this? I love those things that take you out of what you're expecting.
Yeah.
What is people want to subvert your expectations, which can be a lot of fun, but when people are expecting a certain thing in a movie, and sometimes not so good.
Yes.
J.J. Abrams. Jar Jar.
I
Abrams.
wasn't gonna poke that well.
Jar Jar Abrams, he needs to stick to TV. He loves his little mystery boxes, which is great for episodic things, but when it comes to movies, he gets so wrapped up in those things that he forgets to finish things off in movies, or he leaves things open that just like, hey, I would actually, why is this story not done?
He's not interested in answering questions, which, like you said, worked great for Alias, worked great for the beginning of Lost.
Yeah. And he also loves lens flare too much, and he has a total man crush on Spielberg. I have to say, he's great at generic sci-fi. He needs to stay away from established things. Make your own. I know. They need to stop. Like hiring for generic, hey, we want to create a new world. Because honestly, I think he could be a great choice to start a new, cool franchise.
Was Cloverfield him?
I don't remember. I was never a big fan of the Cloverfield stuff.
Sure.
Just not a fan of the shaky cam, the whole shaky cam genre. Yeah, and it just find it like it has this. Let's see, one of my David Fincher did. I love him. I believe it was David Fincher did 7.
Yes.
And he almost never uses shaky cam, and you go through the basic all of 7, and where he brings in shaky cam is at the end. What's in the box? And every time the camera is on the detectives, it's shaky because they're both frantic, and the mood is like you're getting like he's using it to get you amped up and shaky. But every time he goes back to Kevin Spacey sitting there, the camera's locked down and super still because he knows exactly what's going on. Everything is going exactly to plan. And the juxtaposition of that stable shot of the mastermind and the emotional detective on shaky cam is perfect.
Right.
But you don't. All the rest of his shots are well planned out, well thought out. They're not. He uses it very.
Right.
It's not like Blair Witch where people were getting sick in the theater. Like,
right.
I can't watch this.
I will say that I loved on Battlestar when like the ship would get hit with a torpedo and they would just like chuck the camera to the side. Like, that was very satisfying.
Yeah, if you've got a purpose for it, great, do that. I love it. Like in the old Star Treks, it's like everybody just jolted around and they shook the camera. Like, I fall over. It's like. Because it was cheaper than making the set shake. Where in later movies they're like, oh, we're gonna build this whole set and it's gonna shake. And I'm like, oh, it was actually more fun when they did it the other way. Yeah. Let's see. Here's another one that I like. What bits of your real life experience inform your game design? We've kind of covered little bits and pieces of this.
Yeah, I mean the big one for me is talking about endings. Like I don't want a commitment. I've looked at like Call of Cthulhu Mask of Nyarlathotep is considered to be one of the best adventures ever made. It would take several years to run that. Like unless you're playing it for a couple hours every single week.
Yeah.
And even if you are, like that's at least a year or two commitment. Like it's a huge game. And it's like I'm wary of that. I am very particular about people's time. I try to respect people's time, and I hesitate to be like, okay, this is the game that you're going to play for 3 years. So I try to make games that are small, that have a definitive ending, where it's like, oh, we're going to play a game of D&D. Well, is that a month commitment, a 3-month commitment, a 5-year like, what are you asking from me? So with Cyberrats, I tried to be very clear. Like, this is a game that you can play in 2 hours and have you can do a couple missions. You can do 2 missions in 2 hours, and at the end of 12 sessions, it's over. And that's something I'm always cognizant of. Is like, especially in my most recent release, is like, how is this going to play? How is this going to end? What does this look like at table? Is the big one.
Yeah, that kind of goes to why I typically don't use campaigns, is because I never know what the people sitting down to play with me's time is going to be like. Are they going to be available for 3 months, 6 months? You know, am I going to have these guys 1 week a month for, you know, or 1 week, 1 day a week for 1 month? And I try to, you know, if I try to make a game that I've got places to go. Like, okay, we're at a great stopping point. You know, do you guys want to continue on with this, or do you want to play a different game, or, you know, are you guys done? You know, you've completed goal 1. Is this enough for, you know, a short campaign for you, or do you want to go longer?
Yeah, I never want to get to a point where people are like, "Oh, I resent that I'm busy on Tuesdays."
Yeah, I never want gaming to get in the way of your life. I would like it to be part of your life, but
yeah, I often do like 5-session campaigns, and I do it on, like, I do 2 weeks on, take a week off, 2 weeks on. And that way people have some time to breathe and process, and it doesn't feel like you're booked up for the next 2 months.
Yeah. And then also with that, because sometimes people do need to take a break. They'll you know, hey, we've been playing once a week for the last month. We've hit a great. Can we take 2 weeks off and then come back and we play twice a month for a while? You know, give your players those options. You don't want to burn them out. You don't want to chase them away. You know.
Exactly.
And last one from Eric was, how has the pandemic and related changes in the virtual community tools changed how you approach game design?
Yeah.
Because we've kind of talked about how it's affected many other things like playing, but how has it really affected your game design?
So I used to have people, I've been running monthly one-shots for like 5 years now, and I used to have people over to my apartment to do it. And obviously I stopped doing that in 2020. Which has also dramatically changed how I play games, and in turns how I design them. Like with Cyberrats, we were looking into, you know, this is going to be played on a virtual tabletop probably. Like, how much, like, do we need tokens for this? Is that a stretch goal we should have for the Kickstarter? Is that, do we need a bespoke background to be made? You know, do we need battle maps? You know, what tools do we need? And I tried, like, I am very aware that most of these games are going to be played online. I've avoided things that are like, you know, dice stacking mechanics or anything where it's like pass a note card to the person to your left. We've talked about Fiasco a lot. You cannot play Fiasco over webcams. Like,
Dread.
So much of that game involves, or Dread.
Yeah.
But Fiasco, like, involves making eye contact with other people and, like, signaling silently, like, how are we going to do this?
Yeah.
And you can't do it.
Yeah. There's still a way to do it. It's not. It's like trying to have an intimate conversation with somebody over the phone. You're missing all those social cues.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah, I love that so many people are discovering that they can continue to play, because I know tons of people like, man, I haven't played an RPG in years, and then they're like, wait, Roll20 is a thing, or hey, I didn't know that Fantasy Grounds is a thing, and then keep I send people links to different ways that they can play, and they're like, I didn't realize this was a thing, and they get excited because now they can carve out that time, and it's a lot easier to go, hey, I can play 2 hours a week because I'm not taking a half hour to go to your house,
Right.
and then we're gonna sit down and we're gonna chit chat, and we're gonna have beer and pretzels, and then we're gonna play for an hour, hour and a half, and then maybe hang out. And now I've got to drive home, and now I'm gonna be so.
Yes.
So I know a lot of adults that have gotten back into playing games because they can do it on they can play RPGs with people with a camera in their office.
Yeah, you lose the time before and after, which is double-sided. Like,
Yeah.
that social aspect is nice, but it's
Yeah.
nice that you don't have the commute to.
Yeah, so it's a double-edged sword, because it is near impossible, because, well, you can't play Dread. Like, hey, everybody, go get your own Jenga. Okay,
Yeah.
he pulled that one. Everyone else has to pull that one out of their set too. Like,
Yeah.
wait, what? Oh. You mean if he pulls that one and I pull it and I fail, does my character die? Does his character die? How does this work?
Yeah.
That'd actually be entertaining, is play Dread, but you can't pull your own bits.
Huh. Hope everyone at the table likes you.
Exactly. Oh, that is such a weird way to play that game. I now we finally got a physical copy of Dread for the library, and because it's one of my favorite examples. People listening have heard me talk about it, because I always get frustrated with game designers that show me their games that are scrawled notes, and they're creating a mechanic just for the sake of I wanted to create something new, and It's like, if you're don't create a mechanic for the sake of creating a mechanic. Like, make sure that mechanic actually adds to your system, adds to your game. And my favorite example is 10 Candles and Dread, because
Yes.
horror games are notoriously hard to get people invested in, because you have to be a great storyteller, because as soon as the story's done. But if you have that, like with Dread, you're just watching everybody at the table go. No one's breathing while somebody's pulling that freaking block out of the Jenga tower. So that is a perfect example of creating a mechanic that really added to the game. Because one of the things about Call of Cthulhu, it's a horror-based game, but you got to be really good at, like, the best Cthulhu games are the ones that kind of steer away from the being strictly horror.
Right.
Because so many storytellers are bad at telling horror stories.
It's hard. And I mean, I made my last game was Gratitude, a horror game, and that's something that I was very aware of. Is like, this is a genre that's hard to do well.
Yeah.
That a lot of, like, when I come to the table to make the game, I always try to say, what am I trying to do that no one else has done? And for horror, it's like, what am I doing that Dread is not doing better?
Yeah.
Like, there are a lot of games that I've read another game and said, I can't top that. Like, Blades in the Dark solved heisting.
Okay.
A very earlier version of Cyberrats was about the heisting part of Shadowrun. And when I read Blades in the Dark, I said, I have nothing else to say. Like, there's nothing I can add to this that John Harper did not say better. So I just removed the heisting parts almost entirely. And now it's an XCOM game.
And I think it's from what I've gotten to read and see, it's a super creative way to go about it, because you forced everybody's hand into being the hack and slash in the most in that over the top Warhammer way.
Yeah, I mean, one of the, like, we have a page that and Rachel, who does the layout, made it much better. But in the playtest document, it says choose your motivation, and then you have 3 bullet points, and it says debt, or debt. And it's like, that is just the baseline entry. You are a wage slave. You're trying to get out of debt. Like, that's why you are a mercenary here. And, like, the text of the game is, the best choice you have for survival is to pay off your debt and retire. The best choice the planet has for survival is that you never do that.
I like that. So many interesting, fun ways, and I definitely want to have you on stream to run like 3 or 4 rounds of Cyberrats for people.
I would love to.
And we'd love to have you back. Just even running, even if you just want to run your one shots through your Discord on our channel, we would love to have that too. Because
Awesome.
getting people to experience the indie games, because there's a ton of great games out there, and there's also a ton of really bad games that I want people to see as well. Because sometimes you run a bad game just so somebody can experience that there's some bad stuff out there.
Oh yeah.
I need to try to learn. What's this? It was actually made locally. Oh God, why can't I think of it all of a sudden? One of the worst games ever made.
Fatal?
Oh no! Well, actually, that one I'll probably never run on stream, just because that one's definitely a rated R one. No, actually worse than Fatal, but starts with an S. Oh, why can I not think of it all of a sudden?
I don't want to throw anything out. I don't want to offend anyone.
I like it. Don't offend anyone. Oh man. Man, I've got to look this up because it's driving me bonkers. While I'm trying to figure this one out, look. What are some things that you have on the horizons? What's your next project?
So, I have an unannounced project that again I don't want to say anything about, but I have one I can talk about, and that is I ran the most successful Pathfinder game I ever ran. It was over the summer for a group of strangers, two of whom later got married.
Nice.
It's like they did not know each other going in, and they ended up getting married. And that campaign was the result of a bet. Someone bet me whether or not I could run a game where the villain was a pigeon and was compelling. So I ran this game for 3 months of Pathfinder called Reign of Guano, where guano is the enormous pigeon. And I am going to take my campaign notes and release that as a campaign book for both Pathfinder and 5e. So if you have ever wanted to fight a giant pigeon in a game of Pathfinder or in D&D or your favorite D&D like system,
well, you can fight a giant pigeon in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, because there was a giant Pete the Pigeon.
That game, the Ninja Turtle RPG is unparalleled. That is such a good game.
We have 8 copies of the core rulebook, and I took 8 copies somewhere, and 7 of them were checked out at one time. Giant group of people rolling characters. That most people that pull out the books for Teenage Ninja Turtles, because precursor to riffs, but yeah, the people that pull that out, they just have a blast making the characters because it is so hilarious.
It's so fun. I would love to run that one as well. But yeah, that's one where that's the conceit of the game. It's kind of silly, but that is my next project while Cyberrats is getting its finishing touches going on. I'm bringing that one to life, so I'll be doing some playtesting for that one throughout the year. So again, if you keep an eye on my Twitter, you'll see updates about Reign of Guano. We have some art coming in soon.
Reign of Guano. That sounds disturbing.
Reign with a G. But like, what else can we title it? Like, you have to lean in. It's over the top. It's exactly what it says on the tin. Any ideas for the next games we'll bring to your monthly game in your Discord server?
Oh.
So later this month, I'm running a game of Slayers. I'm actually running Cretaceous Skate Park. That is the most heavily requested game in my Discord by far. I'll probably be running Hedge again before long. And then I'm going to be doing a 4E game. That's going to be a mini campaign coming up, 4th edition D&D. Bringing that back. And I have a Cortex Prime Animorphs game coming out later this year. So we've got. And sorry, I'm not making that game. That is a game that I'm running.
Yes.
Later.
Yeah, they were asking what because.
Yes, I just want to be very clear. I'm not making an Animorphs game. I do not have the license. I'd love it. If
we had
is listening.
What was the game system that we had? They because they don't have the rights to it. It's Nintendo. Was it a Legend of Zelda game? Yeah, Carissa. What was the world that we had the two guys on that were running the fan made game, and the PDFs for it. I mean, the layout of it is just so much better than most RPGs that like people are paid to do. Right. I'm asking her a question when she's probably not paying attention now. But yeah, we had a couple people on that were doing a fan made game, and I was blown away at like the quality of the game.
Just I saw the Door Locks Behind You was a Kickstarter project that was in a similar vein.
I hadn't seen that.
Good. It was a zine quest last year, I think.
There were 600 zines in the zine quest last year.
There were a lot, and and I had one of them. But yeah, Door Locks Behind You is just incredible. You have it's explicitly Zelda. Like you have your tools that you gather and use them to solve problems in the dungeon.
What they need to do with zine quest, instead of doing one a year, they need to do them quarterly and accept submissions and kind of break it down, because 600 at one time is just so ridiculous. So if we could do a quarterly zine quest, and then it gives people kind of a better time frame of doing stuff versus, oh god, that's coming in 2 weeks, I gotta, and they rush finish something. Okay, hey, I'm not quite ready for this quarter's zine quest, I can be ready for next quarter's. Because next year's is forever away when you're creating a little RPG and you've got another job.
Yeah. No, it's tricky for sure.
I look up worst RPG ever, and everybody keeps coming up with Fatal, and I'm like, no, Fatal's bad, but it's not. Oh god, it starts with an S, and why can I not remember it for the life of me? We've got a couple copies of it too. But it's a huge book. It's massive, and it makes no sense. There's bad mechanics all throughout it. It tries to be everything. It's like fantasy, superhero, sci-fi, and all crammed into one. Oh
god. I see Cinnabar.
Cinnabar, yes, the world of Cinnabar. Oh, yes.
Found it with Google.
How could I not find World of Cinnabar?
I looked up a bad tabletop RPG. And
everything kept coming up as Fatal, and I'm like, Fatal's bad, but Cinnabar.
RPG.net has an article about the Unholy Trinity.
Oh god, what's the Unholy Trinity?
Fatal, World of Cinnabar, or no, actually, right now it's Fatal, Racial Holy War, and Hybrid. But World of Cinnabar used to have a contender.
I don't know how anything could be as bad as Fatal is. It still has some decent mechanics through it. World of Cinnabar has like it. You just, oh man.
I don't want to punch it. Like, having not read this, I don't want to punch down.
I will I'll loan you a copy sometime and let your brain melt.
Thank you. That's so kind.
It's set on Mars, 50,000 years in the future. Oh man, it has been one of the books that like I can sit down and learn most any game. I can run through most games and like figure out the rules. I've read through Cinnabar a handful of times and just like, this guy did not meet a thing that he didn't run into that he didn't want to try to cram into this game. And it's just more and just more like, I'm writing this. This is gonna fit. I swear.
That's honestly, like, knowing what to cut is a really hard skill as a game designer.
Oh yeah, no, he didn't cut anything. He just put more in. He did the exact opposite.
I have a Trello page for Cyberrats that when I was making it, I have a list of like, here's all the cool things. I don't want to delete them, so I'm just going to put them in the ignoring column, and that way I can tell myself that it's still there, and you know, there's a supplement for that down the line, and I can just lie to myself.
So I've actually met the guy that made World of Cinnabar, and he straight up told me, he's like, no, I didn't cut anything. Like everything's great in the system. It's like, okay, he utterly believes he has like the best game ever made. But
that's a good way to sell some copies.
Yeah, I don't know how many he sold, but he did have a successful Kickstarter. Well, I don't know if it was successful. I know he did a Kickstarter for his 3rd edition of the game. Hey, one of the things that when I get game designers that send me games like, hey, what do you think of this? Then pre-publishing, and then I always like to say somebody's always got a vestigial rule in their game, their appendix, and I can usually find that vestigial rule. And the funny thing is, the reason why it's still there is because it was one of their core ideas when they started the game. And then as they started building things out, they're like, oh, this can go away, this can go away. And they're like, oh, this is the core idea for the game. And it no longer makes any sense. Right. But it does to them. But when you hand the book to someone else, they're like, this is like really weird. Like, why is this in here? And you're like, no, it has to be in there. That's the entire core of the game. And you're like, literally, just take it out, reread your rules, and see how much better your game is. and then it's funny because I actually had somebody send me a really angry email after I sat down. I wrote him up like a 4-page, like what I thought a layout, where I thought improvements could be made, and and then came down to some rules questions that I had, and I was like, there's a rule that just kind of makes no sense, and he just sends me this like angry email back, like, I don't know what you have no clue what you're talking about. Oh, you're a hack, just going off on me. And then a few months later, an apology email from the same guy. He's like, I apologize. He goes, I struggling, people weren't getting the rules. I was showing it to new people, and he goes, no one knew why they didn't get it. And he goes, I went back, read your email. He goes, I pulled that rule out. It was one of my original ideas. And he goes, you're right, the game works so much better without it. He goes, it was only in there because I was so attached to this original concept that has moved on. And he goes, it's a much better game, and we're getting closer to producing, sending it to Kickstarter. And it's like, and it's funny that that he was a big enough man to come back and tell me that, like, hey, I totally apologize for being so angry. But it's really hard to be told that your baby's ugly. But sometimes your baby's ugly, and a little plastic surgery will make your baby pretty.
And honestly, that's a great pull quote for you as a consultant. But I definitely don't stand, like, the first game that I made. Like, I look back at it and I recoil like a cat seeing a ghost. Like, it's like, oh, I remember being proud of this. And it's like, there's things here that I stand by, but as a whole, like, you can tell it was my first game.
Yeah, well, and that's the nice thing, is because you're able to go back and look at your first thing and learn from it, and seeing that you've grown. Because I've met people that didn't do well with their first game, and they're like, no, done, nobody liked it, I'm never making a game again. I was like, hey, did you, the first time you played an instrument, did you give up? The first time you rode the bike and fell on your face and skinned your elbows and knees and chin, did you never riding a bike again? I actually asked that of one game designer who said they were giving up after nobody liked their first game, and I was like, did you give up after the first time you didn't ride a bike? He's like, I still don't know how to ride a bike. I was like, well, that just answered a whole lot of questions. I don't need to go any further. I wish I would have gotten that one on air.
I had a game design professor in college say that your first 2 games will be terrible, so get them out as quickly as you can.
Yes, and that's
it's exactly right.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I love zines, because it gives people the ability to put a couple bad products out and not suffer.
Yes.
Because there's nothing worse than, hey, I just spent $50,000 on getting all these books published, and then everyone opens it up and goes, "Oh God, what is this?"
Right.
I know plenty of authors that have put out that love ebooks and stuff, because they've put out bad ebooks and gotten their legs under them and go, okay, hey, I get what I'm doing wrong now. Like, doesn't matter how many times you've written a story, you're still going to do something wrong once you start publishing, and then you can learn from those mistakes. Well, hopefully.
Yeah, it's really incredible just being able, like, I have people who backed my first Kickstarter who continue to back, my second, my third, and it's like, that is like the highest compliment I can receive, is that you played one of my games and you want more. And like, my worst game, like the game that I had the least experience, you want more of, and that. I say the same thing when I run indie games, and when I run a one shot. If someone comes back, that's the highest compliment that they can pay me. Like,
yeah. Well, and I don't know what your first game was. There may have been something really cool there that you can go back and visit as per the world. You may not like the mechanics, or you may have new ideas for the world now. So you could do a second edition, or a revisit to that world.
Yeah. So my first game was Solid Street, and it was a universe independent game, which is already a red flag in my eyes now, because they didn't know what it wanted to be. But I just went back, as part of this month, I went back and revisited it and said, can I cut this down to 10 pages and maintain the essence of it? Get it what it feels like to play Solid Street. And I looked at it and said, yeah, okay. The first game was 110 pages. I'm not saying there's 100 pages of cruft there, but I can certainly trim it down and get to the core idea where the mechanics feel like you're playing the game, like a Monopoly Junior kind of idea.
Monopoly.
Yeah, but it's like, if you're gonna play Monopoly, like, you have to add up hundreds and thousands of dollars, whereas Monopoly Junior, you have like a $5 bill. It's the cognitive load is less, but it ultimately feels like the same mediocre game.
Go back to the 1930s Monopoly, not the original Monopoly before it was bought by
Parker Brothers.
Yeah, Parker Brothers, but like their first release of it, there were no hotels and there was no free parking. And you take out hotels, this is an entirely different game, because those houses run out really fast, and there's not enough to have 4 on every single on every single property. So there becomes a fight for it. The problem with Monopoly as we know it now, everybody uses free parking. As soon as you buy a hotel, you put those houses back into the system. Yep. So everything gets big and crazy. Well, you limit to just houses, there's no hotels, that game becomes super cutthroat, and it's a much faster game.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes adding rules is not a good thing.
Yeah.
The folks we had on earlier was a Zelda game. It was Reclaim the Wild Zelda. So and it's been awesome because Nintendo's not come after them, because everything is totally free, and if you look it up, the PDF they have, once you download it, you're just like, it's like, I have seen plenty of RPGs sitting on bookshelves that don't look as good.
I've been scribbling, every time you say something, I've been like scribbling down notes, and I'm like underlining that one. I'm like, okay, I'll check that one.
Yeah, like I was really it's reclaimthewild.net, and then you download the rules. It's just because it's a Zelda thing. It's free, they charge nothing for it, and it's just a big community fed thing that just, again, I was very impressed.
That's a high praise. I'll consider that. I've got a lot to look into here.
So, when Carissa emailed you, do you remember her talking about the player character confessionals?
Oh my goodness, yes.
Do you have a player character? Do you have one ready?
I have one ready, or I will if you give me just. I took note. I was like, okay, what? Okay, yeah, here. Okay.
This is one of my favorite things to do. Okay, so tell us the system, character name, what race, class, whatever. Are you a half drow bard from third edition, and named Pippi Longstockings?
No, this was this is fourth edition D&D, taking you all the way back to like 2010 or so, and I am Karma, the Tiefling Wizard.
Okay,
And
now
yeah,
in character, tell us your confessional.
of course. So the folks that I've been traveling with, they found my secret stash. The parts of the loot that got separated from the rest into my own bags. Well, they didn't like that none, and they tied me up while I was sleeping. And I woke up and saw them all sharpening weapons, and I didn't like that none either. But that wasn't even the worst of it. See, they were all facing me, and only I was looking out behind them, and I was the only one who saw the wolves circling. Not a good place to be tied up, no siree. So I looked over at the elf, a nice guy named Caladrian. He was the nicest and fastest one of the whole bunch. So I gave him fair warning. I said, "Start running." And then I did what wizards do best, and I cast Empowered Fireball right on myself. These horns aren't just decorative. I don't know what happened to the elf, but it looked like he escaped the blast. I ran the other way and never looked back. It burned off my ropes and made most of my friends drop down. Easy pickings for the wolves. Shame about my stash, though.
Nice, that's great. We've had some really good ones. I've got to go through the ones that. So we had a YouTube channel a while back, so we were doing all our email hosting through Google, and when I moved, it deleted our YouTube account.
Oh no!
And because you no longer have a Google account, delete. And I got the warning afterwards, hey, that would have been awesome. Hey, if you move off of our service, you probably need to attach a different email to this YouTube account before you leave.
Right.
No, I go the YouTube channel still. So I've made a new YouTube channel, but for the library, but I haven't gone back and uploaded all the stuff. I want to sit down and get because what we want is do a nice little silhouette outline, and then the brick wall in the background, and then modulate the voices. One of my favorites is we had a guy playing a game where they were on Mars, and we bleeped his name. He's like, "My name is President of Mars." So just bleeping his name, but leaving the President of Mars every time he said it was comical as hell. And we'll take a voice recorder with us to events and let people sit down and do their own player character confessionals. And so we'll tell what system it's in. So hopefully the next month or two. Well, next month I'm crazy busy. I haven't really been. I've been busy the last couple months, but some of it's just mentally recovering from back-to-back overseas missions. And yeah, for everybody listening out there, March is going to be a weird month for us because the first weekend in March should have an interview and everything, should be good to go. But then I'm leaving for Honduras for a week, and then should be able to do the interview the following week, and then the next day I'm leaving to go to GAMA, the Game Association. So I forget what GAMA stands for. And they invited us to come down so we can meet with companies and see if we can get companies to help us out with future stuff, future events, and even if they're just donating books to us. But hopefully we can get so if you're watching, you can see the little bar up top. We're trying to get funds so that we can make sure that we can get the library and people to Gen Con, and whatever is not used for Gen Con is going to go to Origins and PAX Unplugged, because it costs us a fair amount of money to get to these events, So like when we go to PAX Unplugged, they ship our stuff because they're local to where we are. So just taking up one pallet is not a big deal. So we pay to fly out, we pay for our rooms, but they pay to ship the stuff, which shipping what we do for the library costs about $1,500 to $2,000 to ship. That's what it cost me a couple years ago to get to Gen Con just for the library. Then we paid for flights and rooms, and Gen Con actually gave us a room, which was nice. Hey, Happy Gothard donated $5. So we're $205 towards our $4,000 goal. Because going down to Gamma, like they've given us passes and everything, but we've got to fly down to Gamma. We've got to pay for rooms. Right. It's a 5-day event, but we're only going to do 3 days just because funds wise, that's really all we can afford. Because it's still going to be, I think with rooms and flights, it's like $600 a person for us to be down there.
Sure.
So we're going to pay $1,200 out of pocket to hopefully get more funds in. The nature of constantly begging for funds with a nonprofit is pretty insane. If anybody out there is a grant writer, let us know. We could use 2 or 3 of those. So, well, I think this has been a lot of fun. We've been actually on for 2.5 hours. Is there anything that you want to talk about before we wrap this up?
I don't think so. We pretty much covered it.
Once Cyberrats is available, where can they get it?
That's a great question. So Cyberrats, the PDFs will be out. We're currently aiming at, I think, May.
Okay.
And you can get those on itch.io, alrine.itch.io, my itch page. And the physical copies will be about a month later, and probably the same place.
Awesome. And then all your other stuff is available on your itch.io page?
That's right.
Okay. What are your other games?
So my other games are Solemnity, Gratitude, a horror game that we've talked about, a ton of Slayers content, new classes, new hunts, and then I have a sad astronaut game called Close Encounters. Okay, hang on. What is a sad astronaut game? So,
are you a sad astronaut, or is it a sad game that it has astronauts in it?
You are a sad astronaut. You are stranded on a robot planet that is trying to kill you. Do you know the game Galapagos, the board game?
No.
Okay. This is Galapagos meets Numenera. So Galapagos is Survivor. You're all stranded on a desert island. There's not enough resources to go around. You decide who gets the resources and who dies. You are stranded on a robot planet. The robot planet captures ships like yours, tears them apart, and demands to be fed technology every night. You go and scavenge ships for tech, and you can either use those tech to, like in Numenera style, to like do a fantastic effect, like fly or walk through walls, or you can feed that tech to the robot and survive for another night. If you build up enough tech, you can repair your ship and try to escape. But the way that as you fail things, you accumulate stress, and the way that you remove stress is by having flashbacks to when you met your crew, when you fell in love, when you first trusted each other, and so on. So it's a very sappy game. That's just very fun.
Well, double check your schedule for SecureCon, NorwestCon weekend, and we'll find some space for you to come and run games. Especially, I want to sit down and see some of these run. And while we've been chatting, I contacted Spencer Campbell, and he's agreed to come on and do a weekly chat with us.
Awesome.
Sending the email to the missus. Bam.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. This has been a blast.
It's been a lot of fun. We've went on some crazy tangents, and that's why I try not to do a standard. The first couple of the ones we did of these, which sadly I think are lost to time, I did very normal interview style, and they were okay. But you get normal interviews everywhere. I just like to sit
Right.
down and have that chat with everybody so that we get to know a little more about the game designer, because like you said, you have people that are continually coming back for your Kickstarter just because they like what you do. Well,
Right.
I'd like people to get to know you and be excited about your next thing, because you've got maybe they kind of like your game, but now they have a connection with you, and now they
Right.
get why you've made some of those choices. They're like, oh man, I can see his love for this in this. So hopefully we can connect a couple more people with you, and this interview will stay around for time, and people will continue to find you.
Woohoo.
So, well, you have a wonderful day, and for everybody tuning in out there, thank you for coming to the library today, and we're going to go ahead and close the library, and thank you for visiting, and you'll have to renew your card for another day. Thank you all for coming.